For our Experts in Emotion interview, we have the honor of speaking with Dr. Joseph Campos from the University of California, Berkeley on emotion development. Dr. Campos received his PhD from Cornell University and completed postdoctoral training in psychophysiology at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. His first faculty position was at the University of Denver in infant psychophysiology, and he's currently a professor of psychology at UC Berkeley. Dr. Campos was one of the founders of the experimental study of human infants in the late 1960s, and his work with babies led to three major areas of original contribution. First was the finding that motoric developments such as crawling proceed and recently have been shown to cause major changes in emotion, perception, spatial cognition, and even language. Second, his other contribution came in the field which we now call social referencing, which is the baby's search for and use of emotional information from significant others to help regulate their behavior. And his third major contribution has come from what he has called the functionalist theory of emotions, which stresses the equifinality and equipotentiality of emotional responses in the interests of problem solving. Dr. Campos has edited the volume on emotion and early development in the Handbook of Child Psychology and was a co-author of one of the first textbooks in infant development in 1982. His career has been marked by awards for distinguished teaching, and he was the president of the International Society for Infant Studies and the co-founder and first president of the International Society for Research on Emotions. So I now turn to our Experts in Emotion interview with Dr. Joseph Campos. So welcome, Joe. Thanks for speaking with us today.
Well, nice to see you again, June. It's been, I think, 10 years since I first met you, so maybe not that long, but it's good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while.
It's good to see you too, and yes, it has been about that long. I would say perhaps even more than 10 years, so it's exciting to be able to have this opportunity to talk with you as one of the people, for a lot of people, me included, that got me excited about emotion in the first place.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. You asked about why I got into emotion.
Yeah, what first got you interested in studying emotion?
Well, that's kind of like asking me what got me interested in breathing. To me, it was just a fundamental. I found it always interesting to see how people reacted emotionally. You know, whether it was my parents or my siblings or whether it was my friends. Or going to a baseball game or a football game, emotion seemed to be everywhere. And if there's one thing that's been constant in my career, it's been the interest in the study of emotion. And it began with studying animals at the time when behaviorism ruled. And believe it or not, my master's thesis was called Masochism in Modern Goats, which indicated my interest even with animals, because when you condition, in this case it was a goat or set of goats, to expect a UCS of a shock. So you have a CS, a conditioned stimulus that came on, a tone or a buzzer, and then a few seconds later a shock. The animals seem to be more upset during the time between the conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus than when he or she got the shock. So I decided, well, maybe they will bring the shock on earlier and shock themselves. And guess what? They do. They brought on the shock earlier. And so that's why I call it masochism in modern goats. So subsequently, I lost my interest in goat cuisine. You know, at the time I was a graduate student, so you ate your subjects. Then I moved on to college students, and that was an awful lot of fun, studying psychophysiology. Psychophysiological responses are just wonderful in terms of being sensitive and keeping you disciplined. You can't be sloppy with psychophysiological indices. And every time I turned the page in the study of emotion, I got more and more interested. So it's very fundamental. It's one of those questions that you can't answer directly, because, as I said, it's kind of like, well, why are you interested in breathing? It's just second nature.
And so you're right. I mean, emotions are such an integral part of what make us human, and just sort of what, govern every single part of our life in many ways. And so I think your answer makes a lot of sense for many of us out there in terms of what first got us captured by emotion. It's part of our life, just like breathing. What I'd like to ask you a bit now is about your work on emotion, this central part of our life. And I want to start by asking you a bit about some of your work that you're widely known for. So this influential work on the visual cliff, that demonstrated the power of emotional communication between a young infant and their caregiver through social referencing. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about this for those who may not know about this, really powerful phenomena of emotional communication early on in life.
Well, when I got into the field of emotion and psychology, the first part of it involved just making sure that emotions were studied, because when I came into the field, emotions were anathema. There were no textbooks on emotion. There were no entries on emotion in any handbook. There were no chapters on emotion in any handbook. So the first thing I wanted to do is to study emotion per se. And it turns out that most behavioral scientists study emotions and emotional expressions as an outward sign of an internal state. For example, the first thing in my email today was a call for papers for a journal, The Face and the Brain. And that indicates the typical approach, which is to study how an outward sign of emotion reflects something internal. But I thought that that was only half the story, and you had to turn the coin over and see the obverse. Emotions are transmitted. They're broadcasts. They're not just the outward sign of an internal state. They're not just expressions. And when I had children, my wife and I had children, what I observed is that they kept looking to us in certain times, in certain contexts. And that led me to determine methods by which you could study the effects of emotions, emotional expressions, for example, not as outward signs of an internal state, but as regulators of the behavior of the other. I frankly think that that is the real value of emotion. The fact that they are crucial in regulating the behavior of others and others regulating our behavior. By the way, a very good illustration in contemporary psychology is a current interest in self-conscious emotions like shame. It's actually misnamed. It shouldn't be self-conscious. It should be other-conscious. And the interest in self-conscious just emphasizes a solipsistic phenomenon where all you're interested in is what takes place in the brain, in the mind, and then how it goes out to the edge of the body, and there it stops. Not so. Not so. Other conscious means that when you're in a state of shame, you are receiving, in reality or through attribution, the social signals of another person which powerfully affect your behavior. For example, the scorn of another person, the disappointment or disgust of another person, and so forth. Same thing with pride. It is the reaction of the other that matters, not this self idea. The self is involved in all aspects of emotion, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But it is this emphasis on the other that attracted me. And actually, the view of emotion that I favor, and that, as you know from the seminar that you participated in here at Berkeley, it was what Dick Lazarus favored, was a relational view of emotion, where self and other, or self and object, together, like the North Pole and the South Pole of a magnet, operated in the regulation of behavior or iron filings, whatever you want to call them. So that is what got me involved in what is called social referencing, although that term is actually very narrow in its true designation has become applied more broadly than it was originally intended to be. But I hope that I have captured the sense of the importance of approaching emotion from this transmission orientation to complement the expression orientation.
Yeah, I mean, this is really helpful, and I think it's really important to think of these sort of, other conscious emotions as well. I wondered if you could just say a tiny bit more about sort of the role in fear, as an emotion that is transmitted and picked up by an infant that helps them regulate their behaviors and learn about the world around them through the visual cliff experiment, for example.
Well, the visual cliff experiment was very successful for reasons that we still don't fully understand, but the phenomenon is ubiquitous. It's ubiquitous. In the 1989 earthquake, I was sitting in front of a very large window in Tolman Hall, a window that faced the plaza where people just walked past on their way to their automobiles or to the subway. And the earthquake hit at 5:04. And what did you see? You did not see people, everybody knew it was an earthquake, but you didn't see people look up above to see if a portion of the roofing of Tolman Hall was going to fall on their heads. No, they looked at each other. It's a ubiquitous phenomenon. If you're in an elevator and the elevator suddenly stops, you don't look at the push-button device. You don't look for the telephone that you can call for an emergency help. You look at each other. And in the case of the baby, well, let me just give you an example. One phenomenon that is very, very important in development is called stranger distress. Used to be called stranger anxiety. Well, some babies show it very strongly, and some babies hardly show it at all. And one of the things that we've noticed is that the babies are essentially using the mother's reaction to the stranger as a means of determining how to behave toward that stranger. We did a study with Maria Boscia in which a stranger entered the room, a very simple experiment, and the mother greeted the stranger in the same way, except in terms of the vocalic envelope by which she greeted the stranger. She either said a very cheery, "Hello, how are you?" or a very stern way, "Hello, how are you?" And then the stranger kept approaching the baby. And that very simple vocalization, which lasted no more than 3 to 5 seconds at the very beginning of the entry of the experiment, powerfully affected the 8.5-month-old baby's reaction to that stranger.
Wow. Wow.
And if this happens consistently, the baby is going to learn, hey, mommy doesn't seem to like people who have certain characteristics. Or mommy does like people who have certain characteristics. And in addition to other factors, of course, I would include temperament here. The baby essentially learns to catch the emotion of the other person. And why should a baby become afraid of, for example, cockroaches? Our younger daughter is terrified of insects. She's never been bitten by an insect in any manner that's crucial. But none of us in our family react very friendly to a cockroach and or to a grasshopper, and she's picked that up. So the social referencing phenomenon is a way of learning vicariously through the experiences picked up from the reactions of other people, and it's very biologically adaptive. It can also be very biologically unadaptive if the signal is not veridical or is transmitted in an odd fashion.
So it's really interesting when we think about just the transmission of emotions and how we learn and acquire them. And, with the example you talk about with the earthquake in '89, just how this stays with us throughout life. It makes me think about other work you've done where you've really pioneered our understanding of the development of a wide variety of emotions, including also anger and happiness. And I wonder if you could say a bit more about what do these emotions look like when they first emerge, perhaps even early in infancy?
Well, let me say something that's pretty shocking
Mm-hmm.
to hear, and that is I don't believe emotions, quote unquote, emerge. I think they become organized.
Mm-hmm.
So there are aspects of emotion that are evident very early in the baby's life, and then other aspects of emotion come online, and as the baby develops, more and more aspects come together into that gestalt in terms of the baby's reaction that we call emotion. And depending upon where you cut into this developmental process of organization and putting components together, you can say anger develops at birth, anger develops at 1 month, anger develops at 3 months, anger develops at 7 months. So you have to put the question more specifically. When does a particular aspect of emotion that you're interested in uh, first become quantifiable? And the second question you have to ask is when does the element or the component that you're interested in become linked to other components? For example, anger is not just shown in the face, it's shown in the voice. And mothers will say, oh, my baby is angry. But you look at the facial expression of the baby and you quantify it using any of a number of facial expression coding systems, and you don't get the patterned facial expression. But does that mean that the baby's not showing anger? What about the voice? What about the way that the baby tenses up?
No, it's really interesting. So, I mean, we're talking about this idea of social referencing. We're talking about when emotions first become organized in infants. And a lot of this work really you set the stage for, and has guided a lot of the way researchers looking at emotional development, will operationalize and measure these constructs. And I wonder, as you see where the fields come from, in understanding emotional development, where do you see the face of the future headed moving forward?
Well, in developmental work, obviously, the emotions that I happen to mention as the other conscious emotions have to be studied. Some people say, for example, that shame is a master emotion, the most significant emotion. And when does it begin? And what are its consequences? How does it transmit to others? How does it affect other people? And what is it about other people that bring it about? And Tom Sheff, a sociologist, has argued about the shame-rage spiral. If somebody shames you, yeah, you do withdraw from social contact, but you also have a desire to strike back because your self play a role in emotion, has been wounded. That's very, very important. And the same thing holds true for the other emotions, like jealousy. Here in the Bay Area in the last week, we have had so many horrible crimes, all linked to the emotion of jealousy. Now, to me, I think that that is an extremely important area that has been relatively understudied. I mean, if you did a histogram, you would get 1,000 studies of fear and anger and so forth, and you would only get a little dribby drab of studies on these self-conscious emotions. And most of the studies are not done well. They're not done using a multi-componential approach.
So it's interesting to think about, as the
Shame is
field.
manifest.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying it's interesting to think about, the role of self-conscious emotions as really being an important piece of where the field is going to need to move in understanding emotional development. And I think then I want to ask you, too, as we think about where the field moves forward, and students.
I think
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh.
Why don't you?
Oh, sure. I'll just start over with that question. But essentially, so when we think about where the field of emotions headed moving forward, such a big part of what moves it forward, what the momentum is, are the current students we have today or future students maybe pondering or thinking about embarking in the study of emotion. And so what sort of advice do you give to students who are thinking about, embarking or trying to understand or trying to become part of this movement in the field of emotion?
Well, I would like the next generation of students to not be lemmings. We behavioral scientists, and probably biological scientists and physical scientists as well, are lemmings. We tend to follow the leader, and we tend to add incrementally to the knowledge base of the field. But it does not add to the understanding base of the field. And I'm not going to go into the difference between knowledge and understanding, but the difference is profound. And so what I would like to encourage is for people to try to understand emotion and to understand that if they want to make a solid contribution, in my experience, two factors help make for that advancement. Number one, there has to be an idea that's in the air, that's present. People recognize it, but they don't give it importance. And then, number two, develop a method that allows you to investigate the phenomenon as well as you can. When you have a conjunction of a topic that is deemed to be very important and a method that helps actualize the advancement of our understanding of that topic that is so beginning to emerge to be important, you've got yourself the makings of a solid contribution to understanding.
Thank you so much, Joe, for speaking with us today. It's been just a real pleasure to hear your thoughts and insights on not only emotional development, but the field of emotion as a whole.
Well, I'm sorry that I'm not closer so that we could continue our discussions on these issues because, of course, we've only scratched the surface. The field is very exciting, and if you take out from journals like Emotion and Emotion Review incremental studies that add to the bulk of the journal, it turns out that there's quite a bit of true understanding that remains to be added.
And that's a wonderful place to end, to think about all the truth that will be, to be discovered, as the field moves forward.
Right, and it's very important.
Well, thank you again. So this concludes our Experts in Emotion interview with Dr. Joseph Campos from the University of California at Berkeley.